August 24th, 1942. Northern Stalingrad. The air tastes like brick dust and burnt oil, and the morning sun comes up red through a ceiling of smoke that refuses to lift off the Volga. Along a shattered street lined with half-standing walls, a German infantry platoon from the 71st Infantry Division moves in short, crouched rushes. Their boots crunch glass and clinker. Their faces are gray with soot, eyes stinging. A lieutenant with a map case slapped against his hip keeps pointing forward, toward the industrial sprawl where chimneys and gantries cut jagged shapes in the haze. Every few steps he pauses, listening for the whine of incoming shells, the crack of a rifle, the sudden rattle of a Maxim machine gun. Behind them, engines throb. A pair of Panzer III tanks clatter forward, tracks grinding over rubble, turrets swinging left and right like searching eyes. A half-track Mansu KFZ 251 noses into the street and stops, its mounted MG-34 trained on a windowless block. The smell of hot metal and cordite hangs everywhere. The previous day's bombing has stripped the city raw, turning neighborhoods into broken teeth and open cellars. But the ruins also give the defenders exactly what they need. Inside a collapsed apartment block, a Soviet sergeant wipes dust from his lips and presses his cheek to the stock of a Mosin Nagant. His name is Mikhail, and he is not thinking about grand strategy. He is thinking about angles. He watches the street through a crack between concrete slabs, the rifle barrel resting on a piece of rebar. Beside him, a boyish conscript grips a bundle of grenades so hard his knuckles go white. Somewhere deeper in the building, a Maxim gun crew drags their heavy weapon into position, its water jacket dull and scratched, the belt box clanking softly. Across the northern outskirts, Soviet units are being shoved into the line in fragments. Elements of the 62nd Army, city militia, and NKVD riflemen move through back alleys, down trenches scraped into ash, and into basements that still smell of pickled cabbage and wet plaster. A junior lieutenant tries to organize a firing line using a chalked wall as his map. He points with a pistol, sending 2 men to the stairwell, 3 to the courtyard, 1 to the roof that no longer exists. They are all nervous, all exhausted, and all stubborn in that particular way of men who know retreat means the river at their backs. The German advance is steady at first. The tanks edge forward, their crews buttoned up, radios crackling. Infantry follows close, using the armor as moving cover. A Feldwebel signals with his hand, 2 fingers forward, then down, then a clenched fist. The platoon drops, rifles aimed. A lone Soviet rifle cracks from somewhere unseen, and a German private jerks backward, helmet ringing as he slams onto the rubble. The lieutenant swears and waves for smoke. Gray smoke grenades hiss into the street, and the world turns into a shifting curtain. Through it, you can hear the city breathing, fire popping, distant masonry collapsing, the far-off rumble of artillery that never stops. A German machine gun team sets up behind a broken tram, the MG-34's bipod biting into dust. They fire short bursts, disciplined and sharp, bullets chewing the edges of windows and door frames. Then the Soviets answer, from a cellar mouth. A Maxim opens up with a deep, chattering roar. Rounds tear through the smoke, sparking off tank armor and stitching the street where German boots had been seconds earlier. The Panzer commander reacts instantly. Turret snapping toward the muzzle flashes, and the tank's coaxial gun spits a stream of tracers. The half-track's MG joins in. Brick dust explodes outward as walls are punched apart. Men shout. Someone screams for a medic. Somewhere, a Soviet anti-tank rifle fires. The heavy crack followed by a metallic smack as the round slams into armor and skitters away. Harmless, but loud enough to make every German crewman flinch. In the background, far behind the German line, staff officers at General Friedrich Paulus's command posts believe the city is finally opening. They talk about momentum, about pushing into the industrial districts, about breaking the last resistance before the Volga. But up here, among the wrecked streets and broken factories, the city is not opening. It is closing around them. Every wall is a firing position, every crater a nest, every stairwell a trap. Stalingrad is becoming a maze that kills at 10 meters. The lieutenant lifts his head, eyes narrowed, and points his pistol toward the next block of ruins. His men rise again, stepping into the smoke, following the tanks into northern Stalingrad's industrial edge, where the real fight is waiting in the rubble. The smoke thins as the German platoon reaches the lip of a wide yard, once a loading area, now a field of crushed rail cars, splintered timber, and twisted metal. A factory wall looms ahead, blackened and cracked with shattered windows like empty eye sockets. Somewhere inside, steel cools with a faint pinging sound, and the whole building seems to groan each time the ground shudders from distant shell bursts. The Panzer III on point rolls forward a meter at a time. Its commander, an Oberfeldwebel, keeps his hatch cracked just enough to see, face streaked with grime. He taps the turret ring with a gloved hand, signaling the gunner to hold the barrel steady on a doorway that yawns into darkness. The second tank angles slightly right to cover a broken gap in the wall where Soviet riflemen could appear at 5 paces. The lieutenant splits his men. One squad hugs the left side, moving along a collapsed row of offices. The other squad shadows the tanks, close enough to touch the armor if they need to. A German pioneer team arrives behind them, men carrying satchel charges and wire cutters, their faces set in that hard, quiet way. They are here to open paths through rubble, to blow holes in walls, to turn buildings into corridors. Inside the factory, a Soviet lieutenant named Yuri presses his ear to a steel beam. He listens to the vibrations of tracks, the clatter of boots. He has maybe 30 men. Some regulars, some workers with rifles and armbands, a few NKVD troops who do not smile at all. They have one light machine gun, a DP-27 positioned on an upper catwalk where it can rake the yard. They have grenades, bottles of fuel with rags stuffed in their necks, and a handful of anti-tank grenades made from bundled explosives. Yuri points. 2 men crawl into position behind a pile of sheet metal near the entrance. Another pair moves up a staircase that is missing half its steps, gripping the railing and climbing anyway. A heavy-set sergeant drags a crate of ammunition into the shadow of a furnace, then slaps the lid shut as if that sound might keep fear contained. Outside, the German platoon reaches the edge of the yard. The lieutenant raises his hand and holds it there. He wants the factory taken cleanly. He wants a quick sweep. He believes the Soviets inside are disorganized, half-buried, running out of ammunition. He is not entirely wrong, but he is wrong about one thing that matters more than all the rest. They are not leaving. A faint metallic clink rolls across the yard. The panzer commander tilts his head. Another clink. Then a bottle arcs out of a broken window above the entrance, trailing a rag that burns with a bright orange flame. It strikes the tank's engine deck and shatters. Fire blooms instantly, licking across grates and vents. The commander slams his hatch shut. Inside the tank, the crew feels heat surge like a living thing. Someone shouts for the extinguisher. The driver revs the engine, trying to lurch forward out of the kill zone. A DP-27 opens from the catwalk. Its rate of fire is slower than the German MG-34, but the rounds hit with ugly certainty. A German soldier near the tank folds as bullets punch into his chest. Another drops behind a rail car, scrambling for cover. The lieutenant yells. Voice roar, and the German MG-34 answers with a burst that tears along the catwalk, punching holes through metal plating and showering sparks. The yard becomes a box of ricochets. The second Panzer fires its main gun at the factory entrance. The blast slams dust out of the doorway and shakes the air in your teeth. Brick fragments and chunks of concrete spray outward. For a moment, the gunfire pauses, as if the whole place is taking a breath. Then Soviet grenades start to fly from the upper windows. They bounce on metal, roll into craters, and explode with sharp cracks that echo in the yard. A German soldier feels a hot slap against his cheek as shrapnel slices past. He tries to wipe it away, and his glove comes back wet. The first Panzer, still burning, finally surges forward. Flames trail behind it like a banner. The commander keeps the turret aimed at the window where the bottle came from. The coaxial gun spits tracers into the opening, shredding wooden beams and tearing apart whatever was behind them. The fire on the engine deck is partially smothered, but smoke pours out anyway, thick and oily, making the tank look like a wounded animal trying to keep moving. The lieutenant signals the pioneers. The pioneers rush the wall, crouched, placing a satchel charge against cracked masonry. Their hands move fast, practiced, fuse lit. They fall back, pressed low to the ground. The explosion is a hammer blow. A section of wall collapses inward, creating a jagged breach that vomits dust into the yard. Through the new opening, you can see the factory interior, a canyon of machinery and shadows. The German infantry charges the breach. They go in pairs, rifles up, bayonets fixed, stepping over rubble that shifts underfoot. Inside, the air is cooler but thicker with soot. Light slants through holes in the roof, turning dust into glowing strands. The sound changes instantly, becoming close and monstrous. Every shot amplified by steel and concrete. A Soviet rifle cracks from behind a machine housing. A German soldier falls forward, his helmet rolling away. Another German throws a grenade, the spoon flying off with a snap. The grenade disappears into the darkness, then detonates. A flash and a burst of pressure that slaps everyone's ears. Yuri moves along a line of men crouched behind a conveyor belt. He speaks fast, low, words you cannot quite catch over the roar. He points to the breach. He points to a side passage. He points upward. The plan is simple. Let them come in, then cut them into pieces. On the German side, the lieutenant tries to keep control. He shouts orders, pointing his pistol, pulling men back from doorways, pushing others forward into cover. But the factory eats voices. It eats lines of sight. It eats formations. A German soldier rounds a corner and meets a Soviet worker with a rifle at 3 meters. Both freeze for a fraction of a second. Then both fire. The German staggers, grabs his stomach. The Soviet collapses against a wall and slides down, leaving a dark smear. Somewhere overhead, boots scrape on metal. A Soviet man drops from a catwalk behind a German pair, landing hard, driving a bayonet into the back of one and slamming the other with the butt of his rifle. The German screams and twists, trying to bring his weapon around. Another German appears and fires at point-blank range. The Soviet falls, but the damage is done. The Germans now know there are men above them, below them, behind them. The lieutenant sees the battlefield shrinking. The grand push into the city becomes a fight for a hallway, a staircase, a single room filled with broken tools and burnt paper. Outside, artillery thuds again. Closer now. Dust trickles from beams. The factory trembles, as if annoyed by the noise. In the far distance, beyond the smoke, the Volga glints faintly. The river looks calm from here, indifferent, but everyone inside the factory knows that calm is a lie. Because if they cannot take this place, if they cannot force the Soviets back block by block, the whole northern push will slow. It will bog down in ruins and blood. And the Soviets in the shadows have decided that slowing the Germans is the same as killing them. The factory fight spills outward like oil on water. The Germans cannot stay inside forever because every corner costs a man, every catwalk hoids a knife. So they do what their doctrine teaches. They carve the building into bite-sized chunks, clear one space, seal another, then push again. But Stalingrad does not behave like a village in France or a town in Ukraine. It is too big, too broken, too full of places a man can vanish. By midday, The northern industrial district is a stitched-together battlefield of yards, workshops, half-collapsed dormitories, and open pipes that hiss steam into the air. Heat rises from smoldering debris. The sun bakes the rubble until it smells like hot stone. Flies gather where bodies lie, and men learn to ignore them because there is no time to swat. The lieutenant has lost track of minutes. His platoon has taken a section of factory floor, a small victory measured in meters. He uses a chalk stub to mark a line on a wall, a crude boundary that means nothing once the next grenade lands. A runner arrives, panting, with orders to press forward toward the next cluster of buildings. The message includes a word that makes everyone tense. Scharfschützen, snipers. They have been there all morning, but now they are organized. Somewhere in the ruins, Soviet marksmen have found their perches, not the obvious high windows that the Germans have already learned to rake with machine gun fire, but the strange places: a hole in a furnace casing, a crack between two slabs of concrete, a nest inside an overturned rail car where the interior is black and cool and perfectly still. A German Gefreiter steps into a courtyard and lifts his head to scan the roofline. A single shot snaps. The bullet hits just under his helmet rim. He drops without a sound. The courtyard freezes. Men dive behind shattered masonry. They do not even know where the shot came from. The lieutenant crawls forward, pressing his face to the dirt, eyes wide, trying to see a flicker, a movement, a muzzle flash. Across the yard, in the shadow of a broken boiler, a Soviet sniper named Anatoly rests his cheek on the stock of his rifle. He is thin, patient, almost calm. He has a simple advantage. He knows this ground. He has crawled through these ruins at night, memorizing angles and distances. He has already picked the German officers from their men twice. Each time, the Germans pause, disoriented. And that pause buys time for Soviet infantry to shift positions, to reinforce a doorway, to move ammunition through a trench. Anatoly breathes out slowly. He does not fire again yet. He waits, because he knows the Germans will show themselves if he makes them feel watched. Fear draws men into mistakes. Behind the German line, a heavy weapon section drags up an 8mm mortar. The crew sets the base plate into the dirt and begins dropping rounds, one after another, toward suspected sniper positions. The mortar bombs burst with dull thumps, throwing dust and fragments into the air. The fire is not precise, but it forces heads down. It forces movement, and movement is what the Germans need. A Panzer-Thrür, the second one, rumbles forward again, its paint scraped raw from earlier hits. It fires a shell into a building that might have a machine gun. The shell detonates inside, and the wall bulges outward, then collapses in a sheet of brick. Smoke pours from the new gap. The infantry rushes up, using the tank as a shield, and slips into the building through the hole. Inside, the floor is littered with papers, tools, and splinters. A Soviet soldier lies dead near a stairwell, his rifle still in his hands. A German steps over him and immediately stops. The stairwell is rigged. A grenade on a wire, crude but lethal. He holds up his hand and whispers sharply. The pioneers come forward again, cutters ready, sweat running down their temples. This is the rhythm now. Advance, trap, breach, counterfire. Retreat into cover, advance again. In a narrow passage between two collapsed walls, Soviet infantry waits. Yuri is there, his face smeared with soot, eyes bloodshot. His men have redistributed their last ammunition. A few have German rifles taken from the dead. They do not care about caliber or comfort. They care that the weapon fires. One man has a captured MP-40 cradled like treasure. Another grips a bundle of grenades, counting them with his thumb. They hear the Germans approaching. Boots, low voices. A steel scrape as a rifle barrel hits concrete. Yuri signals. Fist raised, then opens his hand slowly, like releasing a bird. The Germans enter the passage in a cautious file. The first man takes 2 steps, then the world explodes. A Soviet grenade detonates at knee level, shattering legs, ripping through uniforms. The passage fills with dust and screams. Soviet men surge forward, firing from the hip, bayonets stabbing, the fight collapsing into a brutal knot of bodies at arm length. German soldiers try to bring rifles up, but there is no space. A man is slammed against a wall and he feels the concrete bite his spine. Another tries to roll away and finds himself tangled in a dead comrade's straps. The lieutenant arrives at the edge of the passage and sees chaos. He shouts for a machine gun. The MG-34 team pushes forward, setting the weapon on rubble. They fire into the passage, short bursts, the rounds chewing through dust and flesh. Soviet soldiers are thrown backward. But the Soviets have planned for this too. A bottle of fuel arcs from a side hole. It breaks near the MG team, flames splashing across the gunner's sleeve. He screams, dropping the weapon. His assistant tries to beat the fire out with his hands, then jerks back as his own gloves catch. The MG falls silent. Anatoly, somewhere unseen, fires again. This time the bullet finds a German radio operator. The man drops, his headset slipping off, the wire coiling like a dead snake. Communication falters. The lieutenant feels it like a physical blow. Without the radio, he is reduced to shouting and hand signals in a city that swallows sound. Outside the immediate fight, higher headquarters still speaks of steady progress. Reports mention gains, captured buildings, pushed lines. On paper, the advance looks clean. In reality, it looks like this. A German soldier crouched behind a broken pipe, trembling, trying to reload with hands that will not stop shaking. A Soviet worker with a rifle, teeth clenched, firing until the bolt sticks from grime. A panzer crew sweating inside steel, half blinded by smoke, terrified of the next bottle. A sniper's calm breath, a trigger squeeze, a life ended in a blink. The afternoon wears on. Ammunition runs low on both sides. Water is scarce. Men drink from canteens that taste of metal and dust. The wounded moan in corners where no medic can reach. Each side waits for reinforcements that may or may not arrive before night. And as the sun drops behind smoke, the ruins of northern Stalingrad seem to darken with intent. The city does not care who wins. It only offers more hiding places. In the coming hours, the Germans will try to consolidate what they have taken. The Soviets will try to claw it back in the dark, and the fight will become even closer because night in Stalingrad does not bring rest. It brings hunting. Night falls without ceremony. There is no clean sunset, only a slow dimming as smoke thickens and the burning city changes color from red to black. The northern district becomes a landscape of silhouettes. Chimneys stand like broken spears. Flames glow inside windows that no longer have frames. The wind off the Volga slips through holes in walls and across open yards, carrying ash that settles on men's faces like snow. The German lieutenant gathers what remains of his platoon in a half-collapsed workshop. A single lantern is shielded by a helmet to keep the light from leaking. Around it, men sit with their backs to steel cabinets and smashed machines, cleaning rifles with fingers that ache. One man unwraps a bandage and reties it around his forearm. Another stares at nothing, lips moving, perhaps counting rounds, perhaps praying. A Feldwebel whispers the numbers. They are down by more than a third. The lieutenant nods without speaking. He wants to hold what they have taken. He wants to build a line for the morning. The order from above is clear. Secure the gain. Push again at first light. The maps show the northern industrial district as a set of neat blocks, and the objective as a simple arrow. In the dark, there are no blocks, only holes. He assigns positions: a machine gun in a broken doorway, 2 riflemen at a window looking onto the yard, a listening post in a trench that has been dug into rubble. He places his radio operator, a replacement brought up at dusk, in the center. "Keep the set alive," he tells him. "Keep the wire clean. If the Soviets hit in the night, we need artillery." The men nod. They do not say what everyone is thinking. Artillery support is unpredictable at night. Ammunition is not infinite, and the Soviets are close enough that calling fire may mean blowing yourself apart across a span of ruined buildings. Yuri crouches in a basement that smells of wet earth and oil. A small candle burns inside a tin cup, its flame trembling with each distant blast. His men have reorganized again, gathering from alleys and cellars, bringing wounded who can still hold rifles. An NKVD sergeant speaks quietly, eyes hard, insisting on discipline. Yuri listens. He hates the man's certainty, but he also knows certainty can keep terrified troops from breaking. A messenger arrives, breathless, with a simple instruction: counterattack tonight. Hit the Germans before they settle. Use the ruins. Use the darkness. Cut their lines. Kill their officers. Take back what was lost. The message does not mention the cost. It does not need to. Yuri looks at his men. Some are barely adults. Some are factory workers whose hands still carry the ingrained black of metal dust. A few have bandaged heads. One man holds a submachine gun, a PPS-41, its drum magazine full, his eyes shining with grim anticipation. Yuri points to the stairwell. He points to the yard. He points to a gap in the wall that leads into the German-held workshop zone. His plan is fast and crude. Because there is no time for elegance, they move out in small groups, silent as possible. Boots are wrapped in cloth. Metal gear is taped. Breathing is controlled. You can feel the tension in the way bodies lean forward, the way hands grip weapons like they might slip away. In the German workshop, the listening post hears something. Not footsteps exactly, but the faint scrape of rubble disturbed, a whisper of cloth. The soldier leans closer to the dark, trying to separate imagination from reality. He raises his hand to signal. A shape rises from the trench wall, and a knife flashes. The German soldier's mouth opens, but the sound never escapes. He folds, dragged down into the rubble. The Soviets pass over him, flowing into the gap. Then the first grenade lands. It bounces once on concrete, rolling to a stop near the doorway where the German machine gun sits. The gunner sees it a fraction too late. The explosion slams him backward, shredding the doorway, filling the workshop with dust and sparks. Shouts erupt. The lantern is knocked over, and for a moment the interior is lit by a wavering flame that throws monstrous shadows. Soviet troops surge in behind the blast, firing PPS bursts that stitch through darkness. The sound is a violent buzzing roar, loud in the enclosed space. German rifles crack in reply. The lieutenant yells orders, trying to pull men into a defensive arc. He sees figures moving fast, low, and he realizes they are already inside his perimeter. The fight becomes a collision at 5 meters. A German throws himself behind a machine casing and fires into the doorway. Muzzle flashes, lighting his face in staccato. A Soviet soldier leaps through the breach, bayonet forward, and is shot mid-air, falling awkwardly onto a pile of scrap. Another Soviet crawls over him and hurls a grenade deeper into the workshop. The grenade detonates near the radio operator. The set is thrown. Wires snapping. The operator screams, clutching his face, blood slipping between his fingers. The lieutenant's stomach drops. The radio is gone again. He switches to flares. He fires one through a hole in the roof. The green light blooms above the ruins, briefly revealing the yard in ghostly color. In that moment, you can see Soviet shapes moving between rubble piles, more of them than expected. Creeping closer like water rising, German mortars thump, launching rounds blindly into the darkness. Some land short, some land wide. One lands in the yard and kills a Soviet group moving in a crouch. Bodies flung into the air, then collapsing without sound. Another round slams into a German position because the line is not a line anymore, only a patchwork of men fighting in corners. Yuri pushes forward, shouting now because silence is gone. He sees the German lantern fire, the workshop interior flickering. He sees a German officer, the lieutenant, standing to rally his men. Yuri aims his pistol, but someone bumps him. The shot goes wide. The lieutenant ducks and disappears behind a steel cabinet. Anatoly the sniper, who has been waiting all day for this, is also out there in the night. He has shifted position, crawling into a shattered rail car that points toward the German-held workshop. He watches for muzzle flashes. Each flash is a target. Each target is a pause he can exploit. He fires once. The bullet catches a German soldier who is leaning out to throw a grenade. The grenade drops at the man's feet. It detonates. The blast tears open the immediate space, killing him and 2 others. The Soviets cheer in short. Savage bursts, then push again. The Germans respond with a bayonet charge inside the workshop. A sudden aggressive shove meant to reclaim space. The lieutenant leads it because he knows hesitation will get everyone killed. He lunges forward, pistol in one hand, yelling, driving men toward the breach. A German soldier stabs into a Soviet chest. Another swings his rifle butt like a club. The Soviets fight back with knives, with entrenching tools, with anything that fits the hand. For a few seconds, the Germans regain the doorway. They slam it with fire, forcing the Soviets to drop back into the yard. But the Soviets do not retreat far. They melt into the rubble and begin firing from new angles. A PPS rattles from a side hole. A rifle cracks from a basement window. Another grenade arcs in, landing near the workshop wall. The blast sends a shower of metal fragments into the interior. A German soldier screams, clutching his leg. The lieutenant realizes the truth of night in Stalingrad. Holding ground here is not about building a solid line. It is about surviving the next 5 minutes, then the next. It is about keeping enough men alive to still be a unit when dawn comes. In the basement across the yard, Yuri wipes sweat from his face. He has lost men. But he has also inflicted fear. He can feel it. The Germans are not invincible. They can be shaken. They can be cut. They can be made to bleed for every step. The wind off the Volga grows colder. Ash drifts through the broken roofs. Somewhere, a building collapses with a long rumble, as if the city itself is shifting in its sleep. The night counterattack slows, then fragments into scattered firefights. Both sides pull back to pockets of cover, listening for the next movement, the next breath in the dark. And as the first pale hint of morning begins to press against the smoke, the Germans still hold the workshop. Barely, but the Soviets are still there too, closer than ever, alive in the rubble, preparing to do it all again. Dawn arrives as a gray smear behind the smoke. The sun is somewhere above it all, but you only feel its presence as a weak light that turns the dust in the air into a constant haze. The northern district looks even worse in morning clarity. The night's fighting has rearranged the rubble. New craters gape in yards. Walls that stood at midnight now lie flat. Bodies are half buried in brick powder, faces tilted toward nothing. The German lieutenant steps outside the workshop and tastes the air. It is cold now, and it carries a damp edge from the Volga. He wipes his mouth with the back of his glove and checks the men at the doorway. Their eyes are red-rimmed. Their hands move automatically, loading magazines, tightening straps, picking grit out of rifle bolts. A stretcher team passes, carrying a wounded man whose boots drag and leave tracks in dust. A new order arrives at first light, delivered by a runner who looks like he has not slept in days. Press forward, clear the next buildings, reach the deeper industrial blocks. Paulus wants momentum. Sixth Army wants to keep the pressure on, to keep the Soviets from stabilizing. The lieutenant reads the message and feels a familiar tightening in his chest. Forward again, into a place that punishes every meter. He gathers his squad leaders. He points at the nearest objectives, a cluster of low structures and a taller office block beyond. He assigns the pioneers to lead, because there will be more traps, more wire, more holes in the walls that can swallow men. The surviving MG-34 team is repositioned to cover the yard. A mortar section is moved up, its crew hunched under the weight of ammunition. The panzer support is thinner now. One tank from yesterday is gone, burned out, a black husk. Another has moved elsewhere to support a neighboring push. What remains is a single Panzer III that appears at the edge of the yard, engine rattling, its crew looking at the ruins as if they are staring into a mouth. The German advance resumes with the same methodical brutality. Smoke grenades, covering fire, then short rushes. The pioneers move first, checking doorways, probing rubble with bayonets for trip wires. A German soldier spots a thin line of wire stretched across a stairwell and freezes. The pioneer cuts it, and a grenade tied to it drops harmlessly. The soldier exhales, shakily, then moves on, inside the office block. It smells of damp paper and mold. The corridors are choked with debris. A painting hangs sideways on a wall, still showing a smiling Soviet worker with a raised hammer. The irony is almost unbearable. The Germans move past it, weapons raised, scanning every room. Then the snipers begin again. A shot cracks from somewhere high. A German at the rear of the file jerks, then collapses against the corridor wall. His helmet rolls away, clinking softly. The men around him press themselves flat, trying to see where the bullet came from. The lieutenant barks orders, sending 2 men to flank through an adjoining room. They kick down a door and enter a space filled with broken desks and torn files. A second shot. Another man goes down. Outside, Anatoly shifts position, calm as ever. He has moved into a gap between a collapsed roof beam and a broken wall. From here, he can see into the office windows where Germans appear as flickers of movement. He is careful. He never stays after firing twice. He crawls. He slides. He becomes part of the ruin. Each kill is not just a death, but a delay. Each delay is precious. Yuri, meanwhile, has spent the night gathering what he can. Reinforcements arrive in trickles. Men crossing from the riverside through trenches and shell holes, bringing ammunition, bringing grenades, bringing a few precious anti-tank rifles. A political officer speaks to the exhausted troops with a hoarse voice. Hold the factories. Hold the streets. The Germans are not gods. The speech is not eloquent, but it is relentless. And relentlessness is what the Soviets have left. Yuri's unit is ordered to anchor a line around a set of workshops near the German axis of advance. The position is little more than a shattered building with a courtyard and a rubble berm that gives a narrow field of fire. But it has one advantage. It is close. It is so close that German artillery cannot easily hit it without also hitting their own men. The Soviets prepare quickly. A DP-27 is set up behind a heap of bricks. A Maxim is dragged into a doorway that points toward the yard. Men with bottles of fuel and grenades take positions on a second floor that is missing half its walls. Others dig shallow fighting pits in ash, scraping with bayonets and broken tools. When the German platoon reaches the edge of the courtyard, the Soviets let them come. The lieutenant sees the workshop ahead and senses resistance. He can feel it in the way the silence sits too heavy. He signals for the Panzer to move up and fire a few rounds into the upper windows. The tank's gun booms. The shell punches into the building, bursting inside, throwing dust outward for a heartbeat. Nothing. Then the Maxim opens up. Its heavy chatter rips across the courtyard. German soldiers drop flat, Rounds smack into the rubble around them, throwing up puffs of dust. The MG-34 answers. Spitting bursts into the doorway. A Soviet gunner is hit, falls back, and another man takes his place without hesitation. The Germans try to rush the courtyard. Using the Panzer as cover, the tank inches forward, turret swinging. A Soviet anti-tank rifle cracks. The shot slams into the tank's side armor with a sharp metallic ring. It does not penetrate, but it makes the crew flinch and the commander slam his hatch shut. A bottle of fuel arcs down from above. It hits the tank's engine deck and bursts, flames spreading again. The crew fights the fire, coughing as smoke seeps into the compartment. The tank backs away, engine revving, trying to escape the burning trap. The lieutenant sees his armored cover retreat and feels panic threaten to rise. He crushes it down. He waves his men forward anyway. They crawl through rubble, using craters and broken walls. They toss grenades into the doorway. The explosions are loud and close, sending fragments into Soviet positions and shaking the building. Yuri is inside, pressed against a wall. He hears the grenades and counts the seconds, waiting for the blast, then the rush. When the Germans finally come through the doorway, he is ready. The Soviets fire from behind a conveyor belt. The Germans fire back from the threshold. Men drop on both sides. The air fills with powder smoke and dust, thick enough to choke. The fight becomes a slow grind again. Meters of ground taken, then contested, then taken again. On the German side, the lieutenant watches his platoon shrink. Each time a man stands, there is a chance he will not come back down. The snipers keep picking at them. The machine guns keep pinning them. The traps keep maiming them. The city keeps consuming them. And still, the Germans push, not because it is easy, not because they believe it will be quick, but because orders are orders and stopping here feels like death anyway. They have come too far to admit the city can hold them. At mid-morning, a German artillery concentration finally lands deeper in the Soviet positions. The ground shakes. Dust rises in huge sheets. Soviet defenders are forced to pull back from one section of the workshop, coughing, stumbling, dragging wounded. The Germans surge into the gap, seizing a corner of the building, marking another few meters on their mental map. But Yuri is still there. He has retreated only to the next room. He reorganizes what is left and prepares a counter-push. Anatoly is still there too, slipping between ruins, waiting for another officer to expose himself. The Volga wind continues to blow ash across the battlefield, indifferent and cold. By late morning, the northern industrial district has changed hands in tiny pieces a dozen times. The Germans have advanced. Yes, they have taken ground, but the Soviet line has not broken. It has simply bent and reformed, anchored by cellars, stairwells, and men who refuse to let go. The lieutenant looks at the workshop interior and realizes something he cannot say aloud. This is not a battle of sweeping moves. It is a battle of endurance. And endurance is something the city seems to offer the Soviets in endless supply. The afternoon arrives like a weight. Heat builds again in the ruins, trapped by broken walls and low wind. The smoke changes direction, drifting through the industrial blocks in slow bands that hide movement and distort distance. A man looks across a yard and thinks he sees a figure. He raises his rifle. Then the smoke shifts and it is only a hanging curtain of cloth. Fluttering on a wire, the German lieutenant has stopped counting buildings by name. He counts them by sensation. The building where the staircase was rigged with wire. The building where the catwalk attack came from behind. The courtyard where the Maxim pinned them. Each place is a bruise in memory. He squats behind a mound of brick and checks his last grenades. 2. He checks his pistol magazine. Half full. He looks at his men. Some have replaced their helmets with caps because the steel has become unbearable in the heat, and they think the cap might make them feel human again. One man has wrapped his hands in rags to keep the weapon from slipping in sweat. Another keeps blinking hard, as if he can force dust out of his eyes by sheer will. A runner from company headquarters crawls up, panting. He points toward the deeper industrial district and shouts over the noise. Keep pressing. Neighboring units have made gains. Link up. Do not allow the Soviets to re-establish a continuous line. The lieutenant nods and feels the bitter taste in his mouth. Link up means crossing open ground. It means yards full of broken rail and exposed corridors between buildings. It means the exact kind of terrain that makes men die quickly. He waves his platoon forward anyway. They move in staggered groups, using the ruins like stepping stones. The MG-34 is set to cover, its barrel already dark with heat. A mortar section drops rounds into a suspected Soviet nest. The bombs burst behind a line of rubble and throw up black dust, forcing the defenders to duck. The Germans rush the gap. For a few minutes, it works. They take a low structure, likely a maintenance shed, clearing it room by room. Inside, it smells of oil and old metal. A Soviet soldier is found hiding behind a cabinet. He raises his hands. A German private hesitates, then shouts for a guard. The prisoner is shoved into a corner, eyes wide and hollow, as if he cannot believe he is still alive. Outside, someone screams and the sound cuts off abruptly. The lieutenant pushes toward an adjoining building, an administrative block with thick walls and narrow windows. He thinks he can use it as a strong point, a pivot for the next thrust. He sends pioneers first, because there is always a trap. The pioneers find one. A door is wired to a charge. The wire is thin and expertly hidden under dust. One pioneer spots it at the last second and freezes. He cuts it carefully, sweat running into his eyes. The charge does not detonate. He exhales, and the lieutenant feels a brief flash of relief. Then a Soviet grenade lands behind them. It detonates near the breach point, killing one pioneer and wounding another. The Soviets have been watching. They have been waiting for the moment the Germans bunch up. The lieutenant curses and drops flat. Dust blasts over him like a wave. The counterfire begins immediately. A DP-27 rattles from somewhere in the upper floors. Bullets slap into the rubble mound the Germans are using as cover. A Maxim joins in from an angled doorway, cross-firing the approach. The Germans are pinned, forced to press their bodies into the grit. The lieutenant looks left and sees a man trying to crawl back, leaving a dark smear behind him. He shouts for a medic, but the medic is already busy with another wounded soldier whose leg is mangled beyond repair. Across the street, Yuri watches the German push slow and then stall. He has moved with his men again, using the interiors of buildings as concealed routes. He knows the Germans are tired. He can hear it in their firing, bursts that are shorter, more cautious. He knows they are short on ammunition in this pocket. He does not have much more himself, but he has something else. He has proximity. At this range, the Germans cannot bring full weight down without hitting their own troops. At this range, a handful of men with grenades can change the map. Yuri signals. 2 soldiers with bottles of fuel and grenades slip through a gap in a wall and vanish into the smoke. Another group moves through a basement passage that runs beneath the street, emerging behind a pile of wrecked piping. The Soviets are doing what they have learned the ruins allow. They are moving like rats through cracks, appearing where no one expects. Anatoly, the sniper, has also shifted. He is now closer than he has been all day, in the shell of a small guard shack that faces the German position. He watches the lieutenant. He has been watching him for hours, learning his habits. The officer always leans out at the same angle when he looks down the street. He always raises his head a little too high when he tries to see past the rubble. Anatoly waits. The lieutenant cannot stay pinned forever. He needs to regain initiative. He raises his head, just a little, to check the street. The shot cracks. The bullet does not kill him. It clips his temple, tearing through skin and making his vision flash white. He collapses back, stunned, blood running down his cheek. His men shout. One reaches for him, shaking him, trying to see if he's alive. The lieutenant blinks hard, teeth clenched, and forces himself upright enough to speak. His voice is thick, but it is still a command. Hold! Do not break. The German platoon stiffens, not because they feel brave, but because they have seen what happens when a unit breaks in Stalingrad. It becomes isolated, hunted, wiped out in fragments. They return fire wildly toward the guard shack. The MG-34 fires a long burst that kicks dust and splinters into the air. Anatoly crawls away immediately. Already gone, already part of the rubble again. In the smoke, Yuri's 2 men appear behind the German position. A bottle of fuel shatters near the MG-34 team. Flames splash across the ammunition box. The assistant gunner screams as fire catches his sleeve. The weapon stutters and stops. A grenade follows, rolling into the shallow depression where the Germans have clustered. The explosion lifts bodies and scatters gear. The Germans recoil, shocked, and for a moment the line wavers. Yuri takes that moment and drives. Soviet infantry rushes forward in a short, violent burst. PPS fire rattles. Rifles crack at point-blank range. The fight collapses into hand-to-hand again. Men grappling in dust, stabbing, striking with rifle butts, screaming in languages that mean nothing to the city. A German soldier tries to drag the lieutenant back. The officer's boots scrape over rubble. The lieutenant's hands are slick with his own blood and dust. He tries to keep his pistol up, firing at shadows. A Soviet soldier appears through the smoke, bayonet thrusting. A German private fires and drops him. Another Soviet takes his place. The Germans keep backing, step by step, forced out of the shallow cover they had gained. But the Germans do not collapse completely. They fall back into the maintenance shed they took earlier, turning it into a desperate strong point. They stack rubble in the doorway. They point rifles through cracks. They throw their last grenades into the courtyard to stop the Soviet rush. The Soviets pull back a few meters, regrouping behind a wall, breathing hard, faces smeared with soot. Yuri stands in a doorway and looks at the shed. He has taken back the approach. He has inflicted losses, but he has not wiped them out. He knows if he pushes again without support, he will lose too many. He signals his men to hold. The afternoon drags toward evening. The battle settles into a harsh equilibrium. Firefights flare, then fade. Mortars thump, then stop. Men move cautiously, scavenging ammunition from the dead, drinking from canteens that are nearly empty, binding wounds with strips torn from shirts. Above all of it, the industrial district keeps burning. As dusk returns, the lieutenant sits against a wall inside the shed. His head throbs where the bullet grazed him. His men are exhausted, eyes hollow, hands shaking as they reload. He thinks about the word progress, the way it sounds in briefings. He thinks about how progress here is measured in a doorway held for an hour. Outside, Yuri crouches in the rubble and listens to the German voices inside the shed. He knows they are still there. He knows they will try again in the morning. He also knows his own men are still there. 2, stubborn as nails, clinging to ruins because the ruins are all they have. Somewhere beyond the smoke, the Volga moves steadily, indifferent and immense. Barges and boats will keep trying to cross. Men will keep arriving. Ammunition will keep being carried through shell holes. The city will keep eating units and replacing them with new ones. On August 24, 1942, the German 6th Army has pushed into northern Stalingrad, and it can claim that the advance is steady. But as night closes again, the truth is written in the rubble. The city has not been taken. It has only been entered, and once you enter Stalingrad, it does not let go.